I broke up with my wife because she cheated on me with my best friend, first with one and then with the other during a trip when I was... Wife cheated with my best friend on our group trip while I was home injured. They sent videos of it. I confronted her, had a revenge affair. Then we divorced. It's been 5 years to the month since this happened. I was 35 at the time and had been with my wife Jessica, 34F, for 16 years, married for 13. We lived a comfortable upper-middle-class life and had a 15-year-old daughter. I had two best friends that I had met in college. Alex and John. Alex, 33AM, was married to Amy, 31F, and John, 33M, had gotten divorced from his wife that spring. Through us, Jessica and Amy had become best friends, as well as a group of 3 couples. We had been taking a week-long vacation every summer for a few years. At this point, everything was booked and ready when I broke my ankle 2 days before our travel date. Because of this, I decided to not go on the trip as 1, I was non-weight-bearing for 12 weeks, 2, my meds made me extremely tired and sleepy, and 3, I just didn't want to be a burden to everyone else's fun. My wife offered to stay home with me several times, but I convinced her to go ahead and go on the trip. Thus, due to divorce and my ankle, the trip ended up just being Jessica, Alex, Amy, and John. D-Day happened on January 6, 2020. Jessica and Amy had planned a girl shopping weekend a couple of hours away with a hotel on Saturday night. They got caught. Because of the Snapchat map thing that night, after sending my wife a snap of the dog, I flipped to the map only to notice that John was in the exact same location as her. There was no reason for John to be in that city at all. My mind immediately went to the worst, and I began to furiously blow up my wife's phone with calls and texts, but was completely ignored knowing Amy should be there as well. I called Alex to see where she was. I told him what I had seen, and that I was about to make the drive to confront them, and asked if Amy had made the trip. In the saddest voice, he said yes. Jessica picked her up that morning, and he knew that John would be there for a moment. I felt relief. It sounded like John and Amy were having an affair, and my wife was just a cover, but then he said they're having a trio. I went totally numb, but he continued to talk and said, "I'm sorry, it's not the first time she's been with John either, and I've been with her too." My numbness ceased and was replaced by rage. I out and threatened Alex before finally hanging up. I had totally snapped, broke a few things around the house, screamed and cursed everyone. My daughter came out clearly afraid and concerned. She had never seen me like that, and I was hobbling around as I'd only been cleared for walking 2 or 3 weeks earlier upon. Seeing her, I pulled it together, reassured her, apologized, told her everything was fine and that I only freaked out because of a work thing. I'm sure she knew that was all. See, she isn't. Dumb, once she went back to her room, I retreated to mine and called Alex. He picked up right away. I told him he better tell me everything right now. He said he wouldn't leave anything out. It started with the vacation back in August. It was basically 6 days with a travel day on each end. The first day was largely just a chill day around the pool. At the Airbnb, it was day 2 when things started to happen. I knew a full outing had been planned that day without their spouses. John and Jessica kind of naturally paired off. Seeing as they were with a married couple, it all seemed innocent enough and just friendly, but they seemed to get more comfortable as the day went on. That night was a pretty heavy drinking night with dinner back at the B&B. Through dinner, and after the drinking continued, Amy noticed how much flirtier and closer Jessica and John were getting. After a while, Alex and Jessica went upstairs to bed, but John and I stayed downstairs and kept drinking. Eventually, Jessica came back down in a nightgown, which wasn't unusual because she often forgot things in the kitchen. However, this time she stayed and joined in on the drinking. Amy also came back down after getting ready for bed, and things started to get a bit wild. The flirting between John and Jessica became more obvious. Amy told Alex she was feeling uncomfortable and wanted to go to bed, so they left the room. Alex went back downstairs later, though, and saw Jessica and John making out on the couch. He was too shocked to say anything and just went back upstairs. Over the next few days, Alex noticed more inappropriate behavior, but didn't confront anyone. The final straw was when he walked in on Jessica and John having sex in one of the bedrooms. Instead of causing a scene, he backed out quietly and decided to confront Jessica later. However, Jessica begged him to keep it a secret, promising it was just a one-time thing. Alex felt torn between loyalty to his friend and his attraction to Jessica, which she exploited. Eventually, Alex gave in and they started an affair as well. This affair continued sporadically over the next few months. After hearing Alex's full confession, I was devastated and enraged. The betrayal was immense, not just from Jessica, but from two of my closest friends. I didn't know how to process it all. I decided I needed to confront Jessica directly, but I wanted to have some evidence first. I went through Jessica's phone when she came back, finding texts and photos that confirmed everything Alex had told me. I confronted her with the evidence, and she broke down, admitting everything. In my rage and pain, I told her our marriage was over and that she needed to leave the house. She moved in with Amy temporarily, and we started the divorce process soon after. In the midst of all this chaos, I sought comfort and revenge by having an affair of my own. It didn't make me feel any better, but I was too hurt and angry to think clearly. The divorce was finalized a few months later, and I cut off all contact with Jessica, Alex, and John. It's been 5 years since then, and the pain has dulled, but the betrayal still lingers. I focus on my daughter and try to rebuild my life, but it's a slow process. Trust is hard to come by now, and the scars from that time run deep. Clorinda went to their room and left John and Jessica alone. After about an hour, Clorinda decided to quietly venture out to see what became of them. She went by Jessica's room only to find she wasn't there. She then crept up to John's room to hear the clear, distinct sounds of sex between two drunk people trying to keep it down. Clorinda came back to the room and told Alex what was going on. I interrupted him at this point and said, "How could she just let this happen? You said she noticed them getting like this during dinner. Why didn't she pull Jessica aside and intervene?" This is where the story went from bad to just totally awful. Apparently, Alex and Clorinda had been having marital strife themselves for some time, which included a lot of bedroom issues. She had been asking for an open relationship for roughly 6 months at this point. He had finally caved, but asked if they could try swinging first. It was their plan to ask Jessica and me to swing with them on the trip, but when I broke my ankle and didn't go, they figured it was a moot point. So when Jessica and John had their drunken indiscretion, Clorinda figured maybe the swinging could be back on. The next morning, Clorinda went to talk to Jessica about it. She said Jessica had the expected guilt and extreme worry about being found out, especially since there were witnesses. She said it was a huge mistake, but also that it was really, really good, especially for drunk sex. Clorinda said, "Why stop? He just got divorced. You have been on edge because of work for a year now. We're on vacation and nothing came with you, GEG, not your job, not Charles, that's me, not Cora, our daughter. You left your whole life behind. Consider it a free week. Alex and I won't say a thing, and we'll cover if anything comes up." Alex told me she apparently liked the sound of it, but had apprehension. She went to talk to John, and then John came to Alex asking if they were for real about letting this happen. Alex said yes. He had been coached by Clorinda as to what to say, and told him to just get it out over the next few days. "You both deserve a real vacation from everything, and when we go back, it all just goes back to normal, and Charles will never know." I was ready to throw up hearing this. The betrayal of my wife and my two closest friends hit like an anvil. My head was spinning. I was so angry and hurt at the same time, but I needed to know the whole deal. Alex said over the next 3 days, they stuck to all the plans for the trip. I know this to be true because all the expected Instagram and Facebook posts went up. I kept getting included in the group snap from everyone, and Jessica would call twice a day to check in with intermittent texts throughout the day. I suspected absolutely nothing while back home recovering. Alex said those last 3 days, John and Jessica basically acted like a newly dating couple. They made sure on outings that any pictures or posts on social media were innocent, but they held nothing back in terms of holding hands or kissing out, and whenever they got back to the Airbnb, it was almost always immediately to John's bed. They were not quiet about it. It was very evident what they were doing and for how long. He said on the 4th night, they didn't even close the door. On the 5th day, Clorinda enacted her plan. Alex doesn't know what was said, but she got her to agree to the swap. John did say something to Alex, and Alex just said, "Yeah, it's what he wanted." It wasn't, but he had totally caved to Clorinda's pressure by this point. That night, he was with Jessica. He said they did have sex, among other things, and he tried to get into it but was preoccupied knowing Clorinda was with John down the hall. He said Jessica put on a good show, but he knows she wasn't really satisfied. He said the part that really stung his ego was she went back to her room while Clorinda spent the whole night with John. In the morning, he overheard Jessica say, "You owe me one," to Clorinda right when she got up. That was the day they traveled back, all silently swearing to take it to the grave. I remember Jessica getting home and immediately coming to check on me and acting like she was so excited to see me. I realized now that she was doing what betrayed spouses call love bombing. This went on for weeks, and I should have known something was up. We had a good relationship, but she was so attentive, caring, and loving for several weeks upon return. I always thought it was just guilt from leaving me behind with my broken ankle and just feeling refreshed from the vacation. I guess it was really guilt from the cheating. Alex went on to say as soon as they got back from vacation, Clorinda was dead set on the open relationship now. There was no other option. Alex agreed, and they landed on some ground rules. First and foremost, everything was to be all-access VDJ messages, conversations, everything. I asked why the hell he would want all that if he hated the idea of her seeing other guys. He said he asked for that because her first rule was no limits. He wanted to have a list of people who were off limits, and she said no. This was about being open and equal, and they couldn't do that if people were off limits. It was going to be the same for both of them, so he should be fine with it. If he wanted to try and hook up with her sister, he could, and she didn't want coworkers or exes off her list either. He agreed on the stipulation he knows everything and has access to everything. He said he did this to collect evidence for his eventual divorce. She resisted at first, but when he said he'd expose what happened on vacation, she caved. At this point, he asked if I wanted all the messages he had. The vast majority of stuff was his wife with other men VDJ coworkers, randoms. She had been busy, but there were plenty of messages between Jessica and Clorinda. I picked up that Clorinda and John had started a regular affair about 4 months earlier. About 1 month ago, the conversation of the trio started. That whole time after the vacation, Jessica had been really good to me and seemed much happier than before. In the beginning of the conversation, she stuck to the idea that what happened on vacation was ITV DJ. It was a vacation from reality, and now it was over, and life would just go on like normal. About 2 weeks in, she started to show some interest at Clorinda's encouragement. This is when John entered the conversation too. Jessica agreed at this point, and the plan came to be. In addition, Alex had a photo of Jessica and John kissing and a recording of him having sex with her. The son of a bitch had sneakily recorded it. It wasn't the best quality video, but he did manage to get a clear shot of her face and tattoo. I thanked him for the evidence, then told him he was a piece of crap, and after we had our divorces, he better never effing contact me again. Update 2. Jessica went radio silent from my first frantic call until she walked in the door at 7 p.m. on Sunday night. She looked beyond nervous and scared. She already knew I was aware of everything. Alex had left Clorinda a voicemail telling her he gave me everything, told me everything, that he wouldn't be there when she got home, and she needed to sign the divorce papers on the kitchen table. I told Jessica to get her stuff together. Cora came out a moment later, and for a couple of hours we pretended to have a normal Sunday night. Once she went to bed, I asked Jessica what she wanted. She immediately broke down in tears and tried to hug me. I blocked the advance, and she began apologizing profusely and begging for forgiveness. I told her to save it. We had a lot to talk about. I wanted every question answered 100% honestly. If I thought she was lying, I would end the conversation here and file for divorce on Monday. I had tons of evidence, and she wouldn't be able to get anything out of me. We are not in a no-fault state. Then I pointed out that she didn't answer my question. I wanted to know what she wanted. She said she wanted to show me how sorry she was. She wanted to work for forgiveness and for us to work past this. I told her I didn't think it was possible, but would let her explain herself. I asked why she cheated in the first place. She said she had a lot of fun that day, was feeling good and relaxed. She hadn't felt that way in a long time. Work had been so stressful for so long. She let the moment and the drinks take over and just went with it. She tried telling me how terrible she felt after, but I cut her off. I wanted to know why she kept doing it. It was a totally honest answer. She wanted to and could. Yes, Clorinda did get in her head a bit, but also she justified it to herself by saying she had already cheated once. What was the difference at this point? The next part was hard to hear as she described what kind of things they did, as it was a total when in Rome thing. Some of it she hadn't done with me in years. I asked if she was unhappy in our relationship, and she said no. She said we had a good marriage. She just wanted to feel wild and excited. We had gotten somewhat monotonous, and this experience was exhilarating. Her plan had been to have this much sex with me, but when I didn't go, she first thought, well, that's out, but once it was available, she let herself get taken by the moment. I then asked about the swapping. She said that was a huge mistake. Clorinda had talked to her about it, and Jessica said when the trio got proposed, she really tried to stay strong and not get drawn in. But as the weeks went on, she found herself just thinking about it. She told me she caved because John was really good. She had never had a trio and honestly thought she could get away with it. At that point, she asked how I figured it out, and I said I didn't have to answer that. I asked why she didn't come right home once she knew I was on to her. She said, because we were just going to do this. I knew this was coming. Is there really a difference between me staying and continuing the sex I planned and running home right away? The end results are the same. I asked if there was anything else, and she said no. She just wanted a chance to earn trust, forgiveness, and to reconcile. I said no, I don't want this anymore. I am hurt, betrayed, and can't stand to look at her. I was going to file for divorce the very next day. Update 3. When I woke, Jessica was still home. She usually was on her way to the office, but had taken the day off, anticipating I had done the same thing. Once Cora was off to school, she began her love bombing. I told her I didn't care. I'd already seen all this before. She said she had one more proposal for me. All access to her, all of her stuff, all the time. Marriage counseling, she would go to individual counseling, cut off Clorinda permanently, and she would be an open book at all times for any questions. I said those are just things you do when you're trying to reconcile. I don't want to be a warden at home, and I don't want to reconcile. She begged and pleaded and asked that I just wait a week. Just a week. And if next Monday I still felt the same, she would sign no matter what, no contest. I ended up agreeing to the 1-week trial. She continued to love bomb and consistently tried initiating sex. I rejected these usual efforts, and on Thursday told her I was not moved in any way and still planned to file on Monday. Friday after work, I could tell she had something in mind. I really didn't care. I was literally counting the hours until I could be rid of her at this point. The love bombing was not working, and I was actually getting annoyed with her overzealous efforts. She said she thought we couldn't go on because of the imbalance that her infidelity had caused. I wasn't sure at first if she was implying what I thought she was implying, but she was. Jessica said we should have a trio. I said, you did more than that. She said, okay, and you can have a week off marriage. I pointed out that was worthless. As a woman, if she wanted, she could go out right now and find a guy to have sex with at that very moment. I'm a guy, and unless you're a rich guy or a famous guy, you're not picking up women that easily. There's no point in me sitting in bars for a week or on dating apps not getting matches. She said, okay, you can have 10 hall passes that never expire instead. That can be the same woman or 10 different. I replied, you think that's not going to impact our sex life? You're going to be okay with that? Because I doubt it. She said she wouldn't let it suffer. She would make a huge effort to be available for my needs, and we could do any of the things I've ever wanted. I told her I needed to think about it. In retrospect, I realized that what I did next was pretty sleazy. I should have walked away and started over, but I didn't. I told myself, why not? Here was a trio on the table, here was any fantasy I had on the table, and I could use the 10 hall passes to find someone else to move on with. When it was over, I would still divorce her all the same. She had wronged me, and in my mind, cashing in on these offers was totally justified revenge. I said I agreed, but I wanted the trio to be soon. I said she needed to have at least someone agreeing by February 1st, or I was out, because if she couldn't, that meant she wasn't trying, and had just been out to buy herself time. I don't know how she found the girl, but in the week between Christmas and New Year, she showed me a picture of a girl from her spin class. She was gorgeous, and I couldn't believe she found someone that quick and someone so attractive. Tiffany was 25 years old. She and Jessica had been chatting at spin for months, but nothing past regular small talk. I asked how, and Jessica just said she had her ways. My assumption was she offered her a few $100s. About 2 weeks later was the big night. I did something out of spite, though, and it's kind of weird. I didn't act selfish. I had been on Reddit for years at this point and had read several trio stories and advice threads where one partner, usually a woman in FFM, feels left out as their partner focuses on the new person. I made it a point to make sure she was included in the whole thing. I insisted on Tiffany and I focusing on my wife, talked to her throughout, complimented her, etc. I mean, I still had my fun with Tiffany, but I knew this would make Jessica think we were on the right track. I wasn't wrong. She told me how she only did this to try and win me back, but that the whole experience was amazing, and she couldn't believe that it really did make her feel like we had a stronger connection. Prior to that, I had been cashing in on her obligation of being overtly sexual with me. After the trio, she stopped feeling like she was just meeting an obligation. She seemed excited to be with me and to try new things, although I think a part of it was her hope that I would abandon the hall passes. Update 4. Mid-February, I took the first plunge into using the hall passes. There was a 27-year-old restaurant manager, Sabrina, close by my work. I had frequented it often and always thought she was a little flirty with me. I asked her out and lied. I told her I was 2 months into my divorce proceedings. I said we were still living in the same house, but that I had moved into the basement. DJ, another lie. Veronica seemed hesitant, but agreed to the date. Later on, I asked her what made her agree, knowing my situation, and she said she noticed the first time I came in without my wedding ring. I took it off on D-Day, and since by the time I asked her, my tan line was fading away. It meant I wasn't just taking it off to meet women, but not wearing it at all. It wasn't too far after that the COVID-19 shutdown began to hit. At that point, I felt stuck, but I used it as an excuse to not start marriage counseling. Jessica had been insistent on this, but I always said I wouldn't until after the trio. Then I said I wouldn't until after I went on a date, and as soon as that happened, the shutdown started. By April, I had seen Veronica 7 times. We went on 2 actual dates that really tore Jessica up before the shutdowns. Once those started, I just began going over to Veronica's apartment as she lived alone. Needless to say, our relationship turned physical at this point. I was tired of pretending to reconcile. I also think I had hurt Jessica enough. She was too. I still feel heavy guilt for this today. When I said it didn't work and I still wanted a divorce, she didn't fight me. She was sad and seemed defeated. I found a small 2-bedroom house and left Jessica in our family home. The one stand-up thing I can say I did in all this was sit Cora down and tell her the absolute truth. I told her the whole story from the beginning, VDJ her mom's infidelity, and my sleazy behavior after. I wanted her to know both of her parents were wrong. We both loved her and wanted the best, but we both wronged each other too deeply. The 3 of us decided that 50-50 custody was best, so she alternated week to week staying at each other's place. It took until January of 2021 for the divorce to be final. I dated Veronica the entire time. Cora and she got along fine. I was happy Cora didn't see her as the other woman or anything. They never had a step-parent vibe or anything, but were friendly in the way a child is with their parents' friends. My relationship with Veronica lasted until January of this year. It ended because I don't want to marry again or have more children. Jessica had done some sporadic dating over the last couple of years. One guy she was with for about 11 months, then things got weird. We have co-parented pretty effectively through all this. The one thing we both wanted was to be there for our daughter. We've been amicable through all of her events for her sake. Then her high school graduation happened this past May. We ended up sitting by each other. What should have been awkward just wasn't. We started joking around, talking, got a little flirty. It was refreshing. A week later, I was still thinking of the fun I had at graduation. I decided to call Jessica and ask her out. She said absolutely not. This caused quite the swell of embarrassment. Luckily, that was only temporary. After a long pause, she continued, "Unless we go to marriage counseling." I agreed. We had our first session on a Thursday and our second first date on Friday. We are still doing counseling. We decided on a counselor that specializes in ethical non-monogamy, as that was something we both want to explore. It's been 6 months. We've started to talk about me moving back into our original family home. Cora can't believe we're getting back together and says it's weird. She told me when she got back from her first semester at college last week that she wasn't sure if she was happy or concerned, but knows for sure she doesn't want any details of any kind in regards to our exploits. Alex divorced Clorinda and ran for the hills. He put in a work transfer and now lives 4 states away. John and Clorinda tried to make a real relationship work for a while after her. After Jessica's divorce, she got back in contact with Clorinda. After hours of talking, she learned that sex was pretty much the only thing they had in common, and their relationship fizzled out quickly. Clorinda remarried a guy who used to work with Alex and moved with him when he was promoted to a regional manager spot. He is now Alex's direct boss and keeps blocking his transfers. I find this the most hilarious irony I have ever heard. John, or Mother Ear Mike as I refer to him, is still around and still single. I wish him only the worst. Well, that's my story. One day I hope to give a happy ending update, but I guess only time will tell. P.S. Jessica paid Tiffany $1,000 for the trio. Happy holidays.